Hello, and welcome to Spotlight On, the podcast that brings together business leaders, entrepreneurs, and experts covering a range of topics. I'm Nicholas Barton, founder and CEO of the Barton Partnership. We're an award-winning executive recruitment and consulting solutions firm providing permanent search and independent consulting services across strategy, sustainability and M&A, data and analytics, and transformation and change.
Hi, I'm Patrick Blakeney, Managing Principal and Head of the TMT practice for North America at the Barton Partnership. I'm excited to be joined on the podcast today by Mr. Abhay Jain. He's an ex-strategy consultant from Altman Solon and currently the VP of Strategy and Business Development at A+E Networks.
First off, Abhay, I appreciate the time. I know that you and I had a bunch of conversations around this and actually to do this and obviously really pick your brain on all things across media, A&E, and even some other topics that we're going to cross. But first, as the VP of Strategy, Corporate Development, A&E, I think the first question I'll come up with here is really just trying to get a better understanding to start with sharing a bit about yourself, your journey to date as VP of Strategy and Corporate Development, A&E.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I want to start off by saying I'm really glad we got to connect a couple years ago. You're one of the sharpest recruiters I know, and every person you've connected me to has been spot on, like super sharp, knows what they're talking about, and sort of a force to be reckoned with in the industry. So I did definitely want to point that out before I dive in. So you asked me about my journey to date. So my career started all over the place, like literally all over the place. I started working in hospitals in Asia. I worked at a UN-based NGO. I was a lobbyist on K Street. I worked at a PE fund in Austin. I was even a public defender in the South in North Carolina. But I think the most pivotal step that sent me down the path of business building, strategy and technology, media, whatever you want to call it, started with my own music app. It was a discovery and experience platform called SoundScope. You know, I thought it was easy. This is like 2012 time. I thought building a business, it's startup life. No one really cares about metrics. You just got to build and get an audience. So I went through the song and dance, got some gray hairs, bootstrapped it, built it to a team of 12, raised outside capital, was part of an accelerator, the whole shebang. Ultimately, unfortunately, we ran into issues with the technology team, capital issues. One of our investors escaped the country to avoid tax fraud. Ultimately, we ended up selling the business, which is good. It's a win for us, win for me. We made some of our investors whole, so didn't burn any bridges. Stressful because at one point I put payroll on my credit card. Wow. But it really taught me a lot about having ownership, seeing the big picture, and really making decisions like the C-suite or the board would, rather than just a small part of a bigger machine.
How did that bring you to A&E now? Because I know obviously you after this, I think you did a stint with Altman, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. So after I was a shattered shell of a human being, I joined Altman Valandry as a management consultant. One of my first projects was working around the acquisition of Yahoo by a number of potential acquirers. It was there I picked up a lot of critical skills and met a lot of very bright people, learned about data analysis, hypothesis building, commercial due diligence, board and investment management, and really understood the pace of life required to be a management consultant. I was there for, I think, roughly 2 years before I was recruited by a boutique investment bank, which is pretty cool because it's like building a startup within a bank. Essentially, banking, as you know, has lots of spikes, right? You work for 364 days out of the year, hoping to get paid on the 365th. Right. Consulting was cool because it allowed us to tack on smart thinking, deck building, and a lot of necessities that lots of companies don't have when they're exploring big deals. And if you think about it rationally, for doing a deal $50 or $100 million in size or more, spending $500K or $1 million on smart people thinking about, your inputs, the future of your business, and justifying lots of your assumptions around your model, I think it's a valuable spend. So that's the business I built there. Super fascinating. We rebranded as a company called Quire. It started off as Pursuit Advisory, rebranded as Quire. And one of the companies I was advising in the OTT VR space also had investment and had raised capital from the likes of Disney, A&E, WWE, and others. And met the board of advisors, instantly connected with the folks over at A&E. And before I knew it, I was chatting with the EVP of strategy within global content sales, just riffing on the future of ad-supported long-form video. This gentleman mentioned that he was hiring for a VP in New York, and the rest is sort of history. It felt very organic, but I think someone had a plan in mind, whether it was Kim Dobson from A&E or, it felt very smooth, and it felt like I was working with people that I actually wanted to continue to engage with.
And look, I mean, since you've been there now for about a year, share some insights into A&E's streaming strategy and also what differentiates them in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. What makes A+E special is its very long history on cable. We have more than 30,000 successful assets in the market already, meaning they may or may not still be on air or on digital platforms, but people know them, people understand the brand, and would watch it if it was aired on a variety of platforms. And the fact of the matter is lots of those haven't been sufficiently monetized. They aired on cable, they had their life, but now we just have a lot of raw material to work with. And as we move deeper into new forms of monetization, that raw material, it's my job to polish it into gems and not only sell that in the US, in AVOD and FAST and podcasting, but also explore licenses internationally, where true crime shows in Southeast Asia could have a massive second life. That's been incredibly important. We do, associated with those 30,000 assets, we have a wealth of Nielsen data, which has been helpful. I would have to say that our success to date is truly what makes it special. A lot of people are coming into the space or coming into podcasting or coming into FAST without much of a legacy. And it's just, we don't have to spend on new content if we don't want to, because we have so much of it.
A lot of things that you see out there now is, you've got Discovery Plus, Disney Plus, I mean, there's a plus for every network that's out there now, AMC Plus. What do you think there's a scenario where, first off, what do you think about all these different Plus networks? But also, one thing I've thought through is the scenario where they get rolled back into traditional cable models. Is that something that you think can happen, where they just get pulled back in and bundled back out to the under that traditional cable network through like an Altice or a Spectrum or Cox?
That's an interesting point of view. To your first question about, how are these networks changing, Plus networks changing? I mean, the world is changing so fast and so often. You'll see it in the market, you'll see it in financial markets. Consumer behavior is changing, economic pressure, competition, platforms that you didn't think would be that successful are super successful. And then those that you thought would struggle, some end up struggling, some do surprisingly well. So it's really hard to forecast what'll happen. To your question, though, I think it won't truly be returning to cable, but for the end consumer, we might just end up paying just as much as we did for cable. So having worked on bundling strategy for Verizon and AT&T, I know what goes into that. And I think it makes a ton of sense for Verizon to say, look, buy internet for us, we'll bundle. You don't have to get cable. We can bundle ESPN and the news channels for an additional $19 or $20 a month. Makes a ton of sense. I do think bigger players like Disney will start to bundle live events in with Hulu or Disney Plus. Like, they have a lot of optionality, and people are balking at their bills when they're paying for 4 or 5 streaming channels. Stickiness has gone away. So bundling does make a lot of sense. I don't think you'll end up paying for channels you truly don't want, like the no man's land of cable, like those audio channels. But there will definitely be some bundling that, I guess it's pick your poison in a lot of ways in terms of what you want.
Yeah, I think an interesting thought to what you're saying is, how developed would they actually customize something like that, where you could pick this or pick that? Would they ever really bring it down to something that's customizable to almost what somebody wants, right? Like, can somebody build their own network of TVs that they want to watch? It's just like a regular consumer. I mean, it's a thought that's come to mind as you're explaining some of the different scenarios that can come about it. But I mean, Could it ever really be truly customized right down to that?
I could see that being possible. I just, given the dynamics of the current SVOD, like streaming video paywalls, you're not only paying for the shows you watch, you're paying for the investment in shows that you may never watch. So you could see a world that you pay transactionally on a show level, and which people already do on iTunes, but to truly say like, hey, I want this vertical of content from Paramount, this vertical of content, only kids content from Disney, and only live events from ESPN. I don't know how that'll work, but ideally you could customize it such that you get exactly what you want and pay for nothing else. But the economics would have to be pretty spot on and probably pretty expensive if you're only paying for the stuff you watch.
Yeah. Continuing with this streaming platform and kind of looking at some of the winners and losers and how this is really kind of shaking out, a couple of years now, as we've seen so many different changes in the industry. What do you think some of the biggest challenges facing A&E now, and also other streaming services as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think everything's changing, like I said, very quickly. The hardest part is going to be predicting the future. The pandemic's changed a lot. That being said, there was a big spike in viewership of our content and of our channels during the pandemic, and that hasn't gone away. The size of the prize, the appetite for digital video and streaming as a whole has grown. But the reality is, if not yet, then soon, wallets will be shrinking. Ad spend or ad fill rate may go down, even though there's no sign of it. Attention, especially for Gen Z and millennials, is spreading across new social platforms. And one of the most frustrating pieces, like this is definitely a hypothesis, I've seen some data, but every streamer and every paywalled environment, or even fast providers like Samsung and others, keep their data hidden from everyone else. And there's no real uniform data. This data exclusivity is creating problems not only for the people creating the shows, right? Historically, Nielsen, you could see, oh, wow, this episode bombed, this character is not really working. Modern showrunners don't see any of that. They can't be agile during development, but it's also making life tough for folks like us that share their content on Samsung, on Vizio, on Plex, on others. Like, we can't model effective success and failure and use consistent metrics to compare success. Like, hey, if we're really crushing it 1 month with our AVOD services through Roku, what can we attribute that to? We also don't know what changes in Amazon or Roku's UX is bringing our content front and center. Are people finding it easier? There's a lot of data that we'd like to know and we'd like to see to help us better make decisions on where to program, how to price, and what content's working where, that we just don't have access to. And I'm assuming, much like the creatives, we don't really have a choice in figuring that out. And I think that has been a big problem for us, and it'll continue to be a challenge for the next couple of years until there's some sort of normalization or some body that lends itself to some sort of data equality.
When you talk about trying to make better decisions and obviously put out better content towards them, what's the advantage for them to not participate or cooperate and share that kind of data? What ways could it hurt them? Although it's helping, other streaming services that are on their platform like yours.
Well, as a client and a consumer of our content, they want the best from us. So if we know what that is, we can provide it from a creative lens, from a programming lens. If they set out on their own to pick and choose and nitpick what they want, they can't leverage our strengths as programmers. They can't leverage our ability to craft shows specifically for them or evolve shows in certain directions, right? We just have to rely on what they say versus actually being agile and shifting our content or our programming strategy in real time. I do want to point out that competitively, I understand their point of view, because the more they keep from us, the more they can cherry pick and not tell us the true value of what we're creating. So it's diabolical. Right. It makes sense, but I don't think it's an enduring solution, given that there's so many of us trying to create better content on a daily basis, and their short-term wins may not be better for the industry as a whole.
We were talking about data into things before, and I was looking at Deloitte's digital media trends for 2022. And if one of the things that they found were that the US SVOD churn rate about 37%, and that the younger generations are increasingly embracing gaming, social media, and other user-generated content. How are the streaming services adapting to the changing entertainment landscape as a whole?
I'll give you two answers. First, the pieces you mentioned, gaming, social media, user-generated content, or UGC, they're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to make up a larger and larger share of attention, time, eyeballs as society evolves. We really can't fight it. You got to use it, right? I'll give you a real life example. We see massive spikes in our viewership, particularly of true crime, when there's discussions or like a big, pop in chatter about a true crime incident all over social media. Now we're seeing this, we're learning from it. Historically, we've done nothing about it. We're like, wow, we got lucky, we made some more money. But now we're taking active steps to foster discussion, right? Not only through social media and continuing the conversation and adding details, adding fuel to the fire, but also developing podcast shows that are entirely based on discussing what happened in an episode. You've obviously seen that with bigger shows like Walking Dead and others, but I think we can take inventory content and do exactly the same thing. So the second answer to your question, for content and streamers that are at the peak of cultural zeitgeist among Gen Z and millennials, you and like the brand of your content really have to integrate across every environment. And I'll give you a couple of examples that I think have been or could be pretty important, right? Like, so developing skins for weapons and dances in Fortnites around characters for a new movie release. Deadpool did that. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. It reaches Gen Z where they live and reminds them about another form of media that they should consume. I could see a world where you have special NFTs tied to early release of last episodes of major shows like Stranger Things. There's an opportunity to develop filters or challenges across TikTok or Snapchat that bring people into the UGC conversation. Obviously, easier said than done, and you can't forecast virality, but I think efforts have to be made to sort of bring gaming, UGC, social content all together in one, not assault, but one collection and community of discussion and engagement around media. So, I mean, one other example I had, and this, when I was having a discussion with folks over at another media company, was imagine a world where you can have a user-generated campaign to rewrite the last episode of Game of Thrones, right? Crowdsource a better ending, get people involved, find new sources of talent. I just think it would be a fascinating way to marry multiple worlds that may have disparate audiences, but at the same time, creating value for everyone involved.
That's an awesome idea. And just for the record, I had a theory that the White Walkers should have won just because they were created out of good to defend the land anyways, and then they would then turn back into the normal people. But no one I ever spoke to has ever actually, said that that's a great idea. I still think it would have been the most unique ending, but everybody wanted the hero Jon Snow to win, but that's not what
I'm taking submissions. So if you want to submit that, I'll submit it to the judge and jury. I like it. Letting the bad guys win. I'm a fan.
That's some realistic stuff there, man. I mean, sometimes it's not the good guys that always win, sometimes when the bad guys win look, I think that's why, and I don't mean to digress a bit, but I mean, The Dark Knight, which came out a while back, I think one of the great things about that was that if you really look at it, the Joker won a lot of that. I mean, he had the mental game over Batman for quite some until right at the end, and it wasn't Batman that beat him; it was actually the people. But again, don't let me digress a bit. I think that there's something to it where the bad guy could win every now and then. But the pandemic shifted customers' online habits significantly, changing the way brands across a multitude of sectors are interacting and connecting with their audiences. Now, the metaverse has been hailed as the next evolution of social connection. What opportunities does this offer for the media industry?
That's a good question. I think the metaverse is new. It's been a buzzword, particularly for the last year. A lot of people say like it's bogus, it's baloney, it's the way that people dismiss the internet or anything new. I do want to say that I think the opportunity is immense, and let's just start there. As we discussed earlier, We really need to see an intersection of traditional media, gaming, UGC content all in one place. The metaverse allows us to do that, right? You can engage all of your audiences in one place. As a fan, you can build a virtual identity, engage with others around content you like, wear the Deadpool outfit over your Roblox character, and then watch the content, share in a discussion group. Like, it's a place for virtual engagement, and anyone will tell you that engagement is media. So it is innately a media property. But the hard part is, until there's broad adoption, the effective utilization of mainstream media of the metaverse is still a ways away. People will argue that we possess the technology behind it, but in my view, to justify meaningful marketing dollars, the acquisition of rights, technological development, media companies like ours will probably need to see more people spending more time. We're not what you would call early adopters, just given our historic viewers. But I do think we're not foolish enough to not anticipate this coming. So I guess in short, it's coming, it'll be big, but I still think traditional media companies like ours need a little bit of time to develop that adoption.
And as you're talking about that, what new considerations or even responsibilities do you think will emerge for media distributors in the metaverse?
The metaverse will obviously continue to be a place to capture new, young, hip audiences that are eager to engage with content. We can see a world where A+E, can launch virtual place-based opportunities to explore and experience history, or many of our leading shows. Imagine being able to investigate a crime scene with your VR headset. There's a lot that can be done that's fun and exciting. But to your question, the responsibility we have is to understand ourselves, the way we think about innovation, understand, the cost benefits of, in the short term, spending on development and making that kind of investment. Because I think in traditional media's eyes, obviously building our brand and engaging with new fans is important, but we do have a responsibility to focus on return. And I think it may still take a couple years to justify the type of returns we'll need to see to justify investment. So should we all start planning? 100% yes. Even though it's not financially justifiable now, getting the right talent, getting the right plans in place will put us many steps ahead of others that will be late to the party 24 months from now or 36 months from now.
Final question. What do you think streaming is going to look like in 2030?
Oh boy, that's a tough question. I'm glad you saved that for last, because I can wax prosaic about what I think the world will look like in 2030 for the next 5 hours. But aside from the high level predictions and advances in the metaverse, AI, cryptocurrencies, I'll try to keep my answer narrow to, I guess, the streaming, the video, UGC, short form world. And I think I have, let's just stick to three, the rule of three. So I have, the first prediction that I have is around the fact that from a consumer perspective, I think the lines between cable, digital video, ad-supported video, streaming video, user-generated content, short form, it'll all really start to blur together. You'll start to watch cable channels through your virtual MVPDs, like YouTube TV. They'll start layering in channels with short form content from YouTube, or your TikTok streams will start to show up right next to your soap operas. So from our perspective, things won't change. Great, I get everything I want in one place. It's better for me. But it changes the relationship lots of programmers and cable companies and content creators have with each other. And I think the definitions of premium content, non-premium content will start to matter less. The second thing that I want to talk about, and I know people are probably bored to tears hearing about cryptocurrencies and blockchain, but I think one advantage that may come out of it is the avid use of micropayments. Building upon what I said earlier, you'll have all forms of content in all different forms of monetization. You can either rent, buy, watch with ads, watch with half as many ads. So when anything comes on, I think you'll have optionality. You can either pay a small fee to watch ad free, pay on consumption where you have an account or a balance by which you can spend and like spend it now, watch ad free for 5 minutes, pay to rewind. Or alternatively, now that we have the opportunity of data permission, I can imagine a world where you can share demographic data or buying preferences with platforms to gain access to tailor ads, but then you get shows or movies for free. I'm not making a firm prediction here, but I think this optionality through micropayments could provide a pretty interesting shift in the streaming and video world. The last thing, and I think this is nothing new as well, I think IP will become increasingly important. People will become obsessed with finding interesting stories or stories that people are familiar with or stories that people recognize. It's part of the reason why Disney will continue to make a Marvel movie at least once a year from now until the end of time. People associate a certain quality to that brand, understand the big legacy that IP has. And that's why we'll continue to have more and more sequels. I think what will continue to happen is we'll start finding IP and content and stories from more unique places. Obviously, Korean dramas will continue to become important, but I imagine we'll start to resurface stories that are 30 or more years old. Start to surface stories from the world of gaming, or imagine remakes of stories from other countries in Asia, Southeast Asia. And I think once you prove that the story has an audience, media companies will be obsessively putting capital behind it. And I think similarly, with recognizable stories, I think recognizable faces will become incredibly important as well. I imagine TikTokers will become movie stars, will become musicians, sports stars. Like the whole world will start to blend together in an interesting way around recognizability and the building of brands and audiences.
Your perspective is very unique, and just to say the least, in terms of some of the things that you've actually touched on here.
Is unique a good thing or a bad thing?
It's good because a lot of times, most people sometimes just go with the conventional thinking and things like that. But you've blended in different areas of not only what something would look like, what the opportunities are going to be, how they can also coexist in different areas, different regions globally. But also bring it right back down to some of the basics that are going to have to be behind it, some of the fundamentals that are necessary. And I think even, talking about the metaverse, and I'm sitting here saying to myself, like, it's happening. It is right. As you're saying, it's happening. It's around us. I think that the adoption to it has been incremental, but also you're seeing, large companies making huge investments, and so it tells you that there's more than. It's more than just a shiny idea to the, on the left-hand side of the room or something. So it's, again, your perspective. It's one of the reasons why I knew that, sitting and having a chat with you would be not just only interesting, but also thought-provoking. And there's so much to unpack and take away from it. And I genuinely would love to do this again with you, on or off a podcast. Actually, have you been in the metaverse? Have you taken a walk on the wild side and actually been in the metaverse yet?
I have, only for demonstrative purposes. I haven't fully developed my avatar and my identity there, but I put on the headset, I've walked around the metaverse, I've messed around on Roblox, but not as much as I should.
Honestly, I haven't, and it's funny, but I definitely want to, especially after this conversation, I definitely want to actually jump in and take a look around and see what it's like. For Abhay, honestly, much appreciated the time, the thoughts, the ideas, and the perspectives that you were able to share here. It is as valuable as any. And obviously, like I said, the best thing I could always say when I speak to anybody is that I've been able to learn something here, and I could easily say that. So I very much appreciate your time. Obviously, much success to you throughout your career going forward. I'm sure I'll be watching from a distance, and I'm sure that you and I will probably find a place to go break bread around town in the coming weeks.
Yeah, no, likewise. Every question you asked was thought-provoking, and I loved our discussion and hope to continue it. Hopefully you will be watching my career from afar. Hopefully we'll be having more discussions like this very, very soon.